Welcome to Beyond the Briefing. I'm Shannon Marvel. Inverness has everything from history to wild landscapes on its doorstep. But despite this, crime is still an ongoing issue to residents. Today, we're joined by our political reporter Scot Maclennan and Highlands and Islands MSP Edward Mountain to discuss his recent walk with Police Scotland and his visit to HMP Inverness and HMP Highland. Scott, from an outside perspective, why would Edward want to go out and do a walk with police officers during shifts?
Well, he told us that this is something he had done before, and his reason for doing that, and then as well as now, is that he wanted to see what pressures, what successes and what positives, as well as some of the negatives and the challenges that officers are experiencing. It can be a very demanding job, and the feeling, certainly from the Scottish Police Federation and others who represent police officers and their interests, is that the job is getting tougher. And quite a lot of that, they say, is down to a lack of officer numbers. So he went and had a walk around with them on Friday evening till about 1 a.m. so you could get a good cross-section of policing from the city centre team that operates in and around, clearly, the main streets around the restaurants, bars, cafes and what have you, as well as the response team, which tend to operate on a much faster basis and they go out to respond to 999 calls, essentially. For the most part, and so he was able to see both of those types of policing and then to try and draw some conclusions over the weekend before speaking to us. Highland MSP Edward Mountain shadowed officers from Police Scotland in Inverness on Friday evening. He's here to tell us what he saw and what he learned about Cavan policing in the Highland capital. Edward Mountain, can you just tell us first of all where you were, what you did and what you saw?
I started off by meeting some community police officers and talk about some of the problems that they faced. Then I spent a bit of time wandering around Inverness and dealing with a couple of crimes that had been reported in with the Inverness duty crew. And then later on in the evening, I stayed out till about 1 o'clock. I was with the response unit in Inverness and we deployed to various areas around the Highlands looking at incidents.
Now, what was the nature of the incidents? I mean, the reason we ask this is because at the start of the year, Rob Shepherd, who's the top cop in the Highlands, delivered quite a sobering report to Highland Council, noting in almost all areas that crime had, whether it was violent, acquisitive, or sexual crimes, had risen quite substantially. What did you see?
Well, what I saw and heard was that, first of all, I saw a couple of incidents where shoplifting was a problem, and we visited a couple of stores, and in one instance there were 2 people stopped for shoplifting. What I saw was the importance of cameras and the way the bid system works around Inverness, where people keep informed and keep the police informed. I think what I saw with the sadness was that the police had to go and download the images. Wouldn't it be so much better if the images where they were going to be used for evidence were uploaded to a police system so that the police didn't have to go and visit and collect that and take up extra time? The other incident I saw was a disorder incident and a domestic incident, both of which take up a huge amount of police time, and I was impressed by the way the police dealt with it with minimal resources.
Mm-hmm. And did you find that the minimal resources was apparent on your evening with the police?
Absolutely. And when I went to join the response team, there were a limited amount of people in response vehicles because they don't have the staff to manage it. And that's not because they can't recruit them, it's because they don't have the budget and the finances to have more police on the beat. And that will be one of my big takeaways from this visit. The same as it was in 2017. Police officers all told me the acute difficulties of dealing with the amount of people they've got.
Well, this is one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which is you'd noted a number of redundancies in the process that officers have to go through when they are dealing with any particular incident. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, sadly, it's exactly the same thing that I noticed in 2017. So if there's an incident, the police may have to record that incident on 3 different databases. So it's not just a question of recording the incident and moving on. It requires a certain amount of paperwork. Now, I think my son, I talked to him afterwards, told me that in 2013 in Afghanistan, they had biometrics and a very simple way of recording incidents. Okay, it did require it to be uploaded, but that would then transmit across the whole of Afghanistan. We can't do that in Scotland because we're still dealing with antiquated systems and 3 databases to report one incident to make sure it's transmitted across Scotland is not the right way to do it.
So it's quite disjointed, what I'm hearing from you now.
Absolutely disjointed, and it is a function, if I remember rightly, from the 8 police forces, each with their slightly different way of dealing with things. You would have thought, I think, since Police Scotland were formed in 2013, I think it was, that we got that in order, and there was a proper computer database that just required one form to be filled in and then populated across the different crime bases that they have.
It's an important issue. Again, going back to something that Rob Shepherd had told us directly to the Inverness Courier, is that he warned that something has to give with the current numbers of officers that were available to him to deploy, and that if they're soaking up their time in doing something other than specifically what they're intended to do, that surely is a problem. Do you agree?
It's a huge problem, and he knows what the problem is. There were 3 response crews out when I was in Inverness dealing with things. They're dealing with incidents all evening, and then they have to fill in the forms. And sometimes they don't get the forms filled in, and they hope they can get them filled in at the start of the next shift. That kind of works if the next shift isn't busy, but if not, it just builds up. And I think the police officers I spoke to were feeling particularly under pressure to keep on top of all of the paperwork and deal with all the incidents. If you've only got 3 crews responding around Inverness, that's not many.
No, it's not. It's a large city now, quite a large population. One of the issues as well that has come up is assaults on police. Part of that was, again, according to Rob Shepherd, was down to the fact that there was too few officers available, because then you might have a single officer responding to an incident that clearly makes them more vulnerable than if there were 2 there. Is that something you perceived in your night out?
I didn't see that, but what I did see is 2 police officers dealing with a particularly difficult situation where the person who'd been arrested was causing problems in the back of a police van. And I have to say, I was incredibly impressed by the way they dealt with it and the restraint that they showed, even when they were being spat at and verbally abused.
You saw that on
Yeah.
Friday.
Yeah.
And that was because that is a serious thing. The numbers in the Highlands are as high as anywhere else, if not higher than anywhere else in Scotland for assaults on police, and you saw that.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard for a police officer to do that and show the restraint they did. I think I would have struggled, and I was seriously impressed with the way they do it. But what you also have to remember is that there's a limitation. Once that's gone in the back of a police van, where somebody's spat and done that sort of thing, that I have a police van, that's a police van out of action till it can be cleaned up, properly disinfected, and handed back to the police. And that's done by a civilian contractor. So that means that van is out of commission, and that then means that a van has to deploy from somewhere else to help. I mean, it is a complicated system with few police officers, few vehicles, and incredible pressures.
Speaking of those pressures, I mean, even related to that incident, you addressed the issue about the van. The officers who were spat at, they don't really get any time to take a moment and calm themselves down. They have to move on to the next incident. Is that what happened?
And that's exactly what happened. And they had to go back to the area that they were working. And I'm sure that when and if that person goes to court, the Procurator Fiscal will consider it. But it is an incredible pressure to put on people to have that level of abuse. And I think we need to make sure that there are correct ways of dealing with people, and it's taken into account when they're sentenced.
I think nobody would disagree with that. And essentially, one of the dangers there is the toll it will take on officers. With the best will in the world, you go through a bad experience such as that, you're not going to be at your very, very best. For the next call out might require the greatest possible sensitivity.
And I think they do, but I think that, and this is not something they said to me, but I would be depressed if I was them to see somebody who'd behave like that being given a custodial sentence, and then that or not being a custodial sentence because there isn't room in the jails to deal with people. And that brings me on to another point, which I would say is I went and saw before I went out with the police the new HMP Highland, which is coming along well. But we're going to end up with a prison, Porterfield, HMP Porterfield, which has got 93 spaces in it, which is going to become redundant. What are we going to do with that? If we're letting people out early, surely we should be keeping places like that open so that people can serve the correct jail time.
That could be an actual option that is considered, because you would therefore have this time and space to remodel the prison to bring it up to acceptable standards. You've made numerous points about that place in the past, about the nature of rehabilitation and what's needed there.
Well, it could be, and if it worked in conjunction with the new prison, HMP Highland, which will have all those facilities in it, it would also become a useful facility rather than letting people out, because I'm afraid I'm of the old school that if somebody's done something wrong and they've been sentenced, it's not that they should be let off their sentence because we don't have the facilities. We should do that. They should do their sentence and do their time, and we should make sure there are the facilities. There's 93 cells up there, or capacity for 93, often operating at 117, 120 places. If we kept those 93 places open, then absolutely people who did the crime would be able to do the time.
How was the progress that you saw in HMP Highland, the new facility?
Oh, it's great, and so it should be. It's wildly over budget, wildly beyond the time it was when they started constructing it. I remember campaigning on this in 2016, and we're only just going to see it completed. And I think the completion date is August 26. That doesn't mean it will be operational from August 26. There'll be a time before it is, but I wanted to see this open in 2020. And only because places in the Central Belt and Barlinnie were given higher priority than the Highlands if we had to wait so long. And we've had to spend another 100 and something million on it.
Absolutely. Just to round this up, if you were to sit down with First Minister John Swinney tomorrow and he asked you, give me a handful of takeaways to fix the problem with policing in the Highlands, not for a second suggesting it's the officer's fault, but rather the structural issues behind it and funding, what would be top of your list?
Top of my list would be more police officers, and if that wasn't possible, we need to invest in the technology so that the police are not hampered with the amount of time they can spend on the beat by trying to fill in forms. You'd put a computer in every police van. I cannot believe that a police van deploys from Inverness without where it's going programmed in on it, so the officers can concentrate on the driving and concentrate on getting ready to deal with the situation at the other end, rather than trying to wait for phone signal, which we don't always have. Of course, in the Central Belt, they all have, all police cars, I'm sure, have phone signal wherever they go. We're a bigger area in the Highlands. We need more help and we need more technology.
Edward Maclennan, thank you very much.
You've been listening to Beyond the Briefing, the stories behind the headlines, diving deeper into the biggest local stories in the Highlands. This podcast is brought to you by Highland News and Media. It's hosted by Shannon Marvel and produced by Christopher Dixon. If you enjoyed this show, make sure to subscribe and share with others who care about local journalism.